You're listening to Building the Future, a podcast by Kadans Science Partner. And my name is Rudy van Beurden. In this podcast, I meet innovators, trailblazers, and bright minds who are busy building the future. The search for renewable energy sources is gaining ground. Wind and solar energy have been familiar to us for quite some time, but there are countless other innovations that generate emission-free energy. The question we'll try to answer in this very episode is, will we really be able to say goodbye to fossil fuels in the future? And to find out our guest's view on this, we'll start with a slightly provocative statement. A future without fossil fuels is an illusion. Well, we're super curious first and foremost what you yourself as a listener think about it. But together here joining me at the table is Nick Hall, Head Project Manager of Team Solid. First and foremost, what's your take on it? Do you agree or disagree?
I disagree.
You disagree. Thank you. Next to you is sitting Olaf Adan, professor, doctor, connected to the University of Technology in Eindhoven, to TNO, but also the CEO of Cellcius. What is your take on the statement?
I fully disagree.
Disagree as well. And last but not least is Johan Knijp, Head of Section Flow and Fuels with DNV. You are also a consulting partner and a testing partner, all to do with energy sources. What is your take on the statement?
I disagree.
As well. So that's 3 times disagree. Let me start with the youngest member here on the table, because you were only born in the year 2000, you said in the briefing.
Yeah.
Nick, you're a young student and you're the head of the team, of the project team, actually Solid, but it's actually a student team. Can you introduce yourself briefly?
Well, yeah, of course. So, student teams. Well, I'm part of the student team. Solid. I'm not the head, but I'm just the one who is the head of the project there. As a student team, we try to be the gap between what the university tries to develop and the research that they do, and the companies that eventually want to commercialize it. And different student teams do different things, but here on the the Technology University of Eindhoven, most of the student teams are focused on key topics, and one of them is the energy transition. And you have various student teams such as Team Core, the Solar Team Eindhoven, which is a very well-known team, but also us. We focus on the energy transition, particularly on enabling access to clean and renewable energy for everyone and at any time. And in order to do that, we want to create ecosystems. So we are not only a team that tries to develop the technology further, but we also try to do the business cases and the marketing behind it in order to gain some ground, in order to make new, promising technologies that we can use to improve, get rid of fossil fuels.
Yeah, true. And in your specific case, you're studying physics, but now you're taking a break for a whole year in order to be part of the student team. And you work specifically with iron powder as an energy source, as a new promising energy source. I guess it's kind of heavy, but maybe you can tell me a little bit more about it.
Well, yeah, so the whole team actually started in 2016, and that was the research, and why we chose iron powder is based off a research project that was made by a university in Canada, actually. At that time, they were trying to search for a new kind of energy carriers that were sustainable, and they made some. They tried to make an energy source that was, but that when burned was CO2 free. It was not toxic. It had a high energy density in order to be competitive with fossil fuels. And eventually, they found that iron, one of the most abundant resources on Earth, has those properties, and we can use those properties, enable to gain access to energy that is both CO2 neutral, cyclical, easily transportable, and safe.
So many advantages.
Many advantages,
yeah.
Yes.
We will dive into that a little later, but first and foremost, Olaf, you're also sitting here in the same department of the university, physics, but then in the positions of being a professor. we also promised Nick he wouldn't have to be intimidated by you, as you being the professor here on the table. But you actually also disagree with the statement, a future without fossil fuels is an illusion. You think it is possible to get rid of, to maybe come up with a plan to diminish the impact of fossil fuels?
Well, if I just give my first feedback on the statement, the first thing is that I disagree, because I sincerely believe that we already have a lot of technology, and there will be new technology that will help us to reach the ambition, to realize the ambition. That's the first thing. And we can dive into the details of the technology, but my main concern is, however, that we are able to solve it, but can we really realize that in time? And that's the main issue, because basically we are all in a hurry. We are facing the consequences of the climate change already. And we have set clear ambitions in 2030 and in 2050. In 2050, basically to have a carbon neutral environment. But in order to realize that, there's one thing that we have to focus on, and it's to speed it up.
Yeah.
To speed it up.
It has to be done quicker.
Yeah.
Yeah. Johan, what do you think about it? About the speed that we're working on right now globally?
Yeah. I agree with Olaf that if you look to the IPCC report recently launched, that it's a call for action, and one of the statements is that we need to speed up. In order to reach a net zero in 2050, the technologies are there, but we need to do a lot of work in the upcoming decade to prove that it's possible. I disagree with this statement, because I believe that we need to tell to as many people as we can that they need to take action now. I'm not sure if 2050 is reachable, but at least we should aim for it and start working towards it.
Yeah. And from your position, can you tell me a little bit more what you are doing here in the Netherlands from your position?
I work for DNV, Det Norske Veritas. It's a Norwegian company with offices in the Netherlands as well. We are a consultancy advisory team on one hand, and also a testing team. We test technology here in the Netherlands, in Groningen in the north, to show to the society and to support customers to make a renewable technology available. So we pick up proof of concepts from universities and from early research phase from manufacturers, and we support them in our facilities to bring it to demonstration phase and into pilots and into real life markets. For instance, we work on a lot on renewable fuels, enabling new fuels to enter the market. We did a lot of work for biogas in the recent years, and we're now fully working on hydrogen, for instance. And one of the spearheads we're currently working on is hydrogen for the high temperature industry. Let's say ceramics, steel industry, glass industry. That's a hard to abate sector, and hydrogen can do the job there. However, you need to change some technology in that process, and that's what we're working on together with the industry.
Yeah, so it doesn't really matter where the energy is being used for. The things that you're testing could be heating dwellings, could be also being used for mobility, maybe. Yep. Or
we work for the industry, for the heating market. We work for the mobility market. We test engines as well, and we work for for built environment, for houses, offices as well.
Yeah. Nick, your energy system having to do with iron powder, and it results in becoming rust, or it was rust, and then it's hard to grab my head around.
Yeah, so the whole system, it's about the cycle. So what you have in the beginning, it's iron powder. It's some iron in some form. That iron, just like any other fuel, can react with air. And that produces iron oxide, or the most general term for that is rust, and that's an oxidation reaction. I won't get into the details of it, but what happens is the iron powder gets converted to rust by making use of the oxygen in the air, and with that, it's an exothermic reaction, so energy is created. mostly in the form of heat, and this heat can be used for various purposes, like a heat battery or powering industrial processes, district heating, those kinds of things. And the rust we are left with, we can regenerate it into iron by making use of hydrogen. And the entire process, not a single ounce of CO2 is created. So we, by making use of the entire cycle, harnessing the power of renewable energy sources in order to make the rust into the iron powder with hydrogen. We have clean energy that can be easily transported. The iron can be burned at another location, or what we're currently working on is enable it to store hydrogen in itself. And the rust, the waste product, which is not actually a waste product if you think about it, can be reused.
And you actually have a test pilot project in place with a local brewery, isn't it?
Yeah. Over the last years, actually, the last student team made a pilot together with the Swinkels brewery, Bavaria, and they made an entire test setup together with a couple of partners that was able to produce 100 kilowatts of energy in the form of steam. And Bavaria used that in order to clean their bottles and also to carry out various tasks within the factory. And that not only was it a demonstration event, but we still use that setup today together with the university to do a lot of research on the cyclability of iron powder. So it's not only a project that enabled us to show the world that iron powder is a viable energy carrier, but it also allows us to develop the technology further so it can eventually be picked up by those larger companies.
Yeah, excellent. Olaf, you are also working in physics, obviously, and in the briefing it came forward that we, as mankind, came up with all of these systems in about 150 years. And what you showed already is that you're kind of optimistic in being able to solve it. Whether we have enough time is another question. But you're also working on a solution called the heat battery. What's the heat battery about?
Yeah, so I think that, just to summarize that, the heat battery is what we call a real breakthrough innovation that basically is storing energy. It is basically a storage device and delivers heat. So if you compare it to an electric battery needs electric energy and is giving electric energy. For a heat battery, the input consists of heat or electricity, and it's delivering heat. Mm-hmm. Why I'm just calling that breakthrough technology? Basically, I was just listening to Nick when he was saying we are using one of the commonest materials on Earth. We are doing the same, even more common, I think. So we are using salt on the one hand and water on the other. And if you put those two ingredients together, then a reaction occurs and heat is released. You can compare that if you ever made gypsum by yourself, you are using a powder, you are adding water, a new kind of solid substrate starting to be formed, and it's a bit raising in temperature. Mm-hmm. So that's basically the same principle. So those two ingredients, if you put them together, it is releasing heat, and the nice thing is that you can also reverse that reaction. So you can heat your new solid again and split the original components. So, and then you have water and the salt once again. And as long as you are just keeping them apart, the heat that you have used to split the components is stored. Mm-hmm. Is stored really lossless. And
without
that's the unique thing of the solution that we are now bringing to the market. That is basically without any loss of energy. It's a storage device without any loss of energy.
And you can do it over and over and over again.
Yes. Yeah. So we have built what you can say is a rechargeable battery. And in order to do so, we had to solve two kind of things. The first thing is to find a material that is able to be recharged as many times as you like, so which is inherently stable. That's the first thing that we solved. So we have built a very stable salt composite based on potassium carbonate. Mm-hmm. which is a very common and easy to produce material. And secondly, we have developed a new kind of device that is using the full potential of that material. And we couldn't do that on the basis of the existing technology, so mature reactor technology, because it was either not performing very well or too expensive or too complex. So we introduced a new principle, what we call a closed-loop principle, which is also patented, and which formed the basis of the device that we developed. So the heat battery is basically based on two breakthroughs. The first one is focusing on material, salt and water vapor, and the other one is focusing on the device principle.
Yeah, I'm willing to ask how this got on your path, actually how you discovered, but maybe a better question is asking Johan, if you could make a bet or if you had to choose between the iron powder or the heat battery, what would you pick? Or is this actually a wrong question in the first place?
Maybe it's a wrong question. I believe that we need as many as new technologies as we can to make that step towards net zero in 2050. Maybe you could say that both guys are serving a more or less a different market segment, and both market segments have a need to decarbonize. And what binds us, the three of us, whether it's the pilots I'm mentioning on hydrogen, or Nick with iron powder, and Olaf with the heat battery, is that the Netherlands, of course, is quite addicted to natural gas, and we need solutions to get rid of natural gas and find other ways to heat our homes, to heat the industry. And all the technologies we're working on are pointing in that direction.
Yeah, because what Olaf also said is that he's coming up with a device that's delivering heat.
Yep.
And heat is actually in very high demand, sometimes even more than specifically energy is, because energy has to be converted into heat.
I believe that 80% of the Netherlands energy demand is in heat. 80. So there we need something to different than we do today.
Yeah.
And we need to find our own way, you know. We can look to other countries, but other countries have a different starting point. And the Netherlands' starting point is 40 years of natural gas, a very well-developed natural gas infrastructure that can be used for hydrogen, for instance, and we need other processes and other technologies to get that heat into our industries or into our houses.
Yeah. All right, so the next thing is to install the three of you in The Hague, isn't it? To push forward these technologies. Olaf, what do you think?
Well, I think that's a different job. It's a different job. But, if you're just going back to the first comment I gave on the statement, I think that acceleration, speeding it up, is one of the crucial issues. And in terms of speeding it up, I think there are three main ingredients. Let's start with The Hague. I'm not commenting on The Hague, but what I would like to stress is that decision making about those many different kinds of innovations should be accelerated anyhow. And that's not because the decision making is not. It's just based on the fact that we should speed it up. Let not always a closed business case be the dominating argument whether we should try an innovation, yes or no.
What do you mean with that specifically?
Well, I think that a lot of innovations are hampered by the fact that the business case is already dominating the early stage of you could say the acceleration of the innovation. So that's the first thing. I think that the second thing is always crucial, is to give good examples that innovations are doing the things that they should do. So to use pilots, demonstrations, that's a crucial ingredient. And the third one is acceleration is also referring to another thing, and that's whether we have the resources or the human capacity to realize the implementation of all those technologies on a scale that is related to the entire society. So whether we have sufficient manpower to do so. If you just look to, I'm just giving a very simple example, if you look to thermal insulation is one of the crucial steps, and everybody is agreeing about that, to reduce the demand. In order to thermally insulate your entire housing stock, you need a lot of workforce. And you can give other kind of examples. So we also need to think about solutions that are easily scalable, that are easily replicable, in order to secure that we implement the innovation as fast as possible. On a scale that is needed to realize the ambitions.
And overcoming these 3 hurdles is vital in order to get there.
Yes, I think so.
Nick, what do you think the tendency is amongst fellow students who are in their early 20s? What do they think? Are they optimistic as well to achieve bigger goals in 2050?
Well, I think so. Well, before this podcast started, I thought like, the elections in the Netherlands were just a year ago. So I was like, okay, what was the public opinion on these topics? So I started researching, and I found that, for example, people above 65 or above 50 years, only 15 to 20% of them find the energy transition a really important topic. But if you look to people that are 18 to 24 years old, 51%, so more than half of the students, the young people, find this a really important topic. And it's because, you said I was born in 2000, so that means in 2050 I'm only 50 years old. So when I look at the future, I want it to be something where I want to live in a clean environment, not something dominated by fossil fuels. And about the statement that Johan made earlier, I completely agree. Like, for example, I'm a physicist, so I love technology. I love developing new technology. For example, the nuclear fusion. It's an amazing technology that will help us a lot in the future. But it's so complicated to make, and probably will only use it past 2070, 2080 before it's fully commercialized. So we have to look at technologies that are available today. And that's what I love about the heat battery and our project within Solid as well, is that we develop technologies that are and develop new systems that are based on existing technologies. So we use what is available today in an innovative way in order to reach our goals on the short term. Because indeed, it's not about if we are going to live without fossil fuels, but because eventually they will run out. But it's a greater goal, and we have to achieve that goal in order to live with them even before they run out, because climate change. So we have to be ready in order to take up that challenge. And that's not only student teams or innovative companies, but it's also businesses that are needing to take more risk, look at innovative technologies and just embrace them and try to see if it works. And governments. So that's...
Do you think many people are convinced about this? Because being very honest, here we're sitting in a beautiful, nice building, one of the buildings on the campus of the university, but it's also sort of island, all of these buildings together forming the campus. And then when you just approach the man in the street, is he convinced as well that he or something needs to be changed?
Well, I agree with you that sometimes when you're at the university or another institute, you can sometimes be isolated because everyone at that place is working on similar technologies and learning similar things. But that's also why it is so important to do those demonstrations, as Johan mentioned earlier, and to reach out to the general public in order to familiarize them with those technologies. It's about facing the challenge together. I mean, universities or governments can't do it alone. We all have to point our heads in the same direction and do it.
To collaborate.
We just have to collaborate.
Johan?
Yeah, to add on that, your question was, do people have enough awareness to take action? I believe there's a lot of willingness in society to take up things, but some people actually don't have enough knowledge to do the right things. And we as people from the technology side have a responsibility there to take that we need to lower cost and make efficiency higher so that they have options available which are as expensive or as cheap as their current options. And then people are certainly willing to take the more decarbonized, renewable, low carbon option. And DNV, for instance, we take, for instance, if you now look to floating wind as the new step from offshore wind to floating wind, we take a responsibility with a lot of industry partners to make that price lower of floating wind, so that the options for societies and governments are more easy to make. Mm-hmm. That's a responsibility we have as technology providers.
Yeah. All right, fair enough. So do you also see some trends happening, Johan, over the last years? Because one of the things that strikes me is that these technologies being mentioned by Nick and also Olaf, they seem quite simplistic in how they are being put together, and also holistic in a way that we don't have to harvest gas from deep in the grounds or something. Is this something that's happening as well, that people with whatever new innovation they introduce also really check, is this wholesomely good for the planet? Or do you see everything still happening?
Yeah, there's a lot of new stuff in the marketplace. Not all technologies are there yet in terms of price or efficiencies. But as Olaf said, if governments are willing to take some subsidy in to do the first step, and then make technology providers willingness to do the next step, then it would be very good to make that route.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah. All right. Olaf, how are people responding? You're in the professional field for years and years, academia world, also TNO, research center, and now all of a sudden you're the CEO in a business startup company. All these several hats. What is the story you tell whenever you have time to go to a party?
First of all, I don't have time to go to a party, so that's because I'm wearing those many hats.
That's a pity.
But just let me start by saying another thing is that I feel very privileged that I'm one of those very, well, you could say privileged people that was in the middle of the full knowledge chain, starting with the fundamentals at the university, the application of fundamental research within an organization like TNO, and now I'm busy also with transferring that into a real application. The nice thing is that it's going also the other way around. Mm-hmm. That you also learn from the application in terms of what are fundamental questions. The other thing I've experienced is, and that's the thing I'm also telling to others, is I've been working in an organization like TNO for more than 30 years. And the TNO is an organization that is, the mission of TNO is to help to transfer technology into the market and to deliver impact for society. And it's always very difficult to communicate about innovations and about the importance of innovations and about the, you could say, the added value of investing in innovations. When we launched the heat battery, for the first time, we were overwhelmed, really overwhelmed. It started 1.5 years ago with a response from the public, but also from investors, from other industrial companies about the heat battery innovation. Mm-hmm. And the lesson I've learned from that is that because it's so easy to imagine what the innovation is all about, it's very easy to communicate. So communication is also a crucial aspect if you talk about bringing innovation to the market. Yeah. But just talking about the heat battery, I'm just saying, okay, it's a fantastic device. It's greener, it's cheaper, it's performing excellent, and it's very small.
Yeah, that makes me think like people should either understand a certain new innovation in order to become enthusiastic and participate in it, or they should think that they can win something out of it financially. Like so many people stepped into Bitcoin without even understanding what they were doing. But as long as they thought we're going to win something from this, so also new solutions should benefit people financially.
It's about understanding what it's all about, but it's primarily about understanding the added value and what does it bring. That's the crucial issue.
And when was it that actually the origins of this very project and this new technology started? How many years ago?
The basic principles about behind the technology, so that's the reaction of salts with water, simply said, are already known for decades. So people have been working on that for many decades. We started working on that some 10, 12 years ago. And as with all innovations, the success depended also a bit on serendipity. Mm-hmm. The first one is about the material, and we had a very focused research on the material. So we managed to create the breakthrough some 3 years ago. Keeping in mind that already for decades people have been working on the material. So 3 years ago that was the first step, and the second step was, and it's not a sequential step, but was working on the device principle, which was really an issue of serendipity. Just a bright student, one of your colleagues, came up with an idea, and that formed the basis.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So it was actually the student who came up with the idea.
Exactly.
Instead of the professor.
Exactly.
Yeah. Nick, did you actually, because now it reminds me as well, because you picked up the idea, or actually the team of Solis picked up the idea in a Canadian paper a while ago. Did you also did a feedback loop and rang them or send them an email by saying, look what we're working on here in this part of Europe?
Well, when the project originally started, it was picked up by a university professor, Philippe de Goey, who's in charge of the flow department of mechanical engineering, if I say it correctly. And he started the communication process, and he was actually the one who thought it was a great idea. And eventually, that formed the group of students, first the Honors Academy, which started the team. It's not that we're now working together with that Canadian university, because it was just a research paper that was written. And that research paper, the interest in that research paper, that focused the team. I don't know myself. Right now we're not having any more communication with the Canadian university from which that paper originated from. But that's also because we're quite far into the development process of one of the technologies, and that's why we're also starting a new project.
Yeah, and what will this new project be about?
Yeah, so I already mentioned it quite shortly. Over the past years, we've been focusing on actually burning hydrogen, so just converting it into rust. But what you can also use iron for, instead of burning it, you can push steam through it. And the water in that steam reacts with the iron as well, and again rust is formed. So you have the same cycle with the iron, something happens, you turn it into rust, and you can regenerate it into iron by making use of renewable energy sources. But now hydrogen is released. So instead of storing hydrogen in large tanks, which is quite expensive, hydrogen is of course a gas that can escape quite quickly. It is an explosive material, and it's very light, so you have to store it on a high pressure. Instead of that, you can just use iron, which I already mentioned. You can transport it really easily. It's quite heavy, so it doesn't have the same applications as hydrogen. You can use hydrogen in a car, but I won't use iron powder in a car, because then it would just be too heavy. But you can harness both the positive aspects of that iron powder and the positive aspects of hydrogen by converting them in each other.
I see Professor Olaf Adan is taking notes already. He thinks he has another light bulb moment here, introduced by a student, who knows. But obviously you're going to collaborate together with these students. Some were on the team, or is everyone totally new on the team?
Everyone is totally new.
Yeah.
So it depends a bit on which student team. Every student team has their own process, but what usually happens with student teams is that people take time off from their studying. That can be part-time for a day, for a couple of days per week, or full-time. And I'm one of those students who does it full-time. I just finished my bachelor and I will take off the next year. I'm also new within the project. What usually happens is that you have a team for 1 year. They do the new recruitment phase, and then the new team gets recruited. The knowledge gets transferred, and then they start over. Which you could imagine has a downside, but on the other hand, it has a positive positive side as well, because every year you have new students in the team, and each of those students has a new look on the project you are working on. So every year you get fresh people with new ideas who can work together on creating a fantastic project.
Yeah.
And
you mentioned about the new project. What would you be able to tell in 12 months' time for the people who will follow up?
Yeah, hopefully we will have realized the first tests. So the project is entirely new. Over the past weeks, we've been working on the project proposal itself. So in 12 months' time, hopefully, we will have done the first business cases. People will know about the potential of I will call it the steam iron process. And we can use the results that we gathered from then together with the setup we will have made in order to continue the project, make it, find partners in order to develop the technology further in bigger projects that can then be commercialized.
Well, maybe there's someone sitting right across you at the table.
Perhaps.
Johan, if you hear about this steam iron, yet again a new system.
Yeah, I'm quite enthusiastic about the story of Nick, so I'm very pleased to have a conversation afterwards with him on this stuff.
Well, there you go.
We work with industry partners to enable new fuels, and this might be the next one in line to get ready to prepare for the industry. Yeah.
And then backed by a Norwegian country and one of the richest countries in the world. So this should be something, Nick.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to take this up after the podcast.
Worthwhile conversation.
Yeah.
I see that we have to wrap it up in a few minutes' time. What should be the key message that we take away from this very episode? What can we tell people?
There's a lot of work to do. It's a big renovation we need to start doing the energy transition, and we need to start now. And luckily, there are many promising technologies. We need a little bit of help to be successful. Then it can be done.
And now you talk for the West European market, or especially for the Dutch market, because the infrastructure we have is quite good, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Other countries might take another route, but we need to find our own one.
Yeah. Other gentlemen?
Well, maybe some addition to that. I think my main message is we should do the best we can to accelerate, and that's not only a matter of technology.
Yeah,
it's referring to a lot of things, including decision making, including mobilizing stakeholders, including convincing people that something has to change.
And also some daring investors, isn't it?
Exactly.
With risk money.
Exactly, and what I would add to that is that the biggest risk that we take is not by taking risk in financing or investing in projects in an early stage, but that we are too late in doing the right things. And that's the biggest risk.
Yeah, that's what you see. Yeah. And Nick, in 2050, you will be 50. By that time, everyone will become 150. So you will have another 100 years to go by then.
Yeah, well, I was going to say almost the same as Johan, that it's just about taking risk. I'm a student, 20 years old, and when I do these kinds of projects, work on the university, if I take risks, I have not a lot to lose. But I think we have to adopt this mentality to look at the problems we are facing and just face them, just do it. Because then I think together we can come out of this, and we will take on this challenge and realize a future without fossil fuels.
Yeah. Wow. The one thing I will take away from this very episode, that I'm sitting here round this table with three very optimistic technical guys, actually. They have said what's needed to convince people. And the one thing I also take away, because I have been studying here at this university as well for quite some years, but it was architecture, so we always got bullied by the physicians, so sorry about that. But is also the task of communicate simply and directly to other people, to other stakeholders, what all these new technologies hold, and maybe even to simplify the message instead of coming up with all the detailed information, because otherwise people won't simply buy it or won't even go for it. Yeah, thank you very much for coming over and for participating in this final episode.
You're welcome.
My pleasure.
Thank you. So, you've listened to Building the Future, a podcast by Kadans Science Partner, and thanks to our guest, Johan Knijp, Head of Section Flow and Fuel at DNV, Nick Hall, Head Project Manager of the student team Solid, and also Olaf, Adan, CEO of Cellcius. This episode was recorded at the TUE campus Eindhoven, and, to be more specific, in Kennispoort, a building from Kadans Science Partner. If you want to find out more about this podcast or our guests, go to kadans.com/podcast. Here you'll also learn more about Kadans Science Partner and how it connects innovative organizations and ecosystems throughout Europe, helping them to work on sustainable solutions for the future. And do not forget to subscribe to this podcast in your favorite app so you won't miss our upcoming episodes. Thanks for listening, and my name is Rudy van Beurden.